Why can't people be nice to one another? Just for a change? I mean, I'm an alien, and you don't want to drag me into the swamps. Do you? You do. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Full Circle, written by Andrew Smith and directed by Peter Grimwood. This is a 4-part adventure. It is the first in the E-Space trilogy. 3 stories set within E-Space, which is different from our usual N-Space. A different pocket universe, which, according to Romana, is outside their reality itself. I don't actually know what that means because it seems like reality just seems perfectly normal in this story and the next story. It's only really Warrior's Gate that actually take advantage of it being in a separate universe. So just the idea of this story being set in a different universe has really nothing to do with anything apart from the fact that it connects it with the other 2 stories to appear next. And what's really interesting about this story is its writer, Andrew Smith, was the youngest writer to ever write for the programme. He was 18 by the time he wrote this. So it makes me feel really sad about myself. Look, this guy was 18 when he accomplished a Doctor Who script, and Full Circle no less. And I'm making YouTube videos at the age of 24. But I digress. And it's also the introduction to new companion, Adric, played by Matthew Waterhouse, I believe his name is. Is it Waterhouse? One sec. Yeah, Andrew Waterhouse. Who was also very young, and from what I could gather, he was a huge Doctor Who fan, so when he was asked to be on the programme, when a casting call for a new companion, he basically jumped at the chance. And later down the line, he had been criticised for being a very weak element of the story, both in terms of his performance and the character that he was given. And God bless Matthew Waterhouse. He seems to have taken it in great stride. He seems to be acknowledging, in interviews I've seen him in, he seems to not only understand that Adric wasn't a very popular character, but he's like, I understand that people don't like him, and that's fair enough, you know. Even he acknowledges that Adric wasn't the best at times, and so God bless him. That man really deserves. He just seems like a really nice guy in real life. I just want to really state that out. He was also the first openly gay actor to play a companion. And yeah, so let's get into Full Circle. So the story starts off with the Doctor and Romana getting a signal from Gallifrey, which is actually a plot element right at the end of Meglos. Just before the Doctor arrives on the TARDIS, Romana's like... K9 has said that Gallifrey is calling us. In the 80s, from Leisur's Hive all the way up to, I believe it's the 5 Doctors, each story would have a little element that connects it to the past or the next story. So it feels like a long line of stories connecting each other, which is really cool, I think. But it's only a very small bit at the start, and the Doctor's saying like how he knew that Romana's time would come to an end because they're trying to get back home, and he's very eager to see Leela, the first K9, and I can't remember what Leela's boyfriend was named in The Invasion of Time, but him. So this story has a shout out to Leela, and me, as somebody who thinks Leela is the best companion, it brought a smile to my face. But when the Doctor turns around, Romana's gone, and he notices that she's gone to her room, and Romana's like, I don't want to go back to Gallifrey. I want to stay and have adventures with you, Doctor. But the Doctor's like, we knew this was going to come. I'm sorry, Romana, but this is how it's going to be. However, they seem to be experience turbulence in the TARDIS. So something goes extremely wrong and there's this weird effect, and they seem to have transported into E-space. Now, what I really like about E-space, in this story anyway, is that to differentiate it from normal space, instead of space being represented with a black void with lots of dots representing the stars, it's a lot of dots representing stars, but like a tinted green space, indicating that this universe is a lot smaller than our own. So, and it does look kind of cheap, but it does the job. It does the job very well. And does it state the music? The music in this is really good. I just got to point that out. It doesn't list the composer on this, which is a real shame. I think they should really put the composer on the back. But there you go. So yeah, this story sees the Doctor believing he lands on Gallifrey because they opened the TARDIS scanner and see Gallifrey's outside. But when they walk outside, because Gallifrey is like a sandy, like desert planet for the majority of it. But when they walk outside, it's like a lush forest. And this is where they work out that they're in a different space and stuff. And it's here we're on the planet Alzarius. And there's this civilization, this group of people, and every few years they go onto the Starliner, a spaceship, and they say that it'll take them into space and they will come back when everything's safe, and it happens like repeatedly. And when they're there, there's this thing called mistfall that happens. It's like a season where steam seems to be coming out of the water, which people believe is poisonous, and with it comes from out of the lakes the Marshmen, these group of weird alien people. They're on the front there. Very cool design, I think. It still looks cheap, but for 1981 it looks very well. It looks very good for 1981, and the first cliffhanger is actually the Doctor going out and looking out and seeing a Marshman coming out of the lake, and they're coming up. And with it then we also get like a subplot with Adric, a young boy who wants to join his brother's gang. Now his brother's gang don't want to go back onto the starship. They believe that the elders of their civilizations are basically lying to them to try and scare them. So when the ship goes, when people go back into the ship, they'll stay behind, but also they kind of try and steal food from the rest of the people. And Adric really wants to join their group because his brother's in it, and so they give him a little test to try and steal melons, which he is totally terrible at. Now let's talk about Adric. Is he as bad as people make him out to be? No way. I can name at least 5 other companions which I personally like worse than him. But that's not to say he's a great companion. He's a bit brash, and he's a bit what's the word I'm trying to think? He seems a bit, for a character that's supposed to be really smart, he seems really dull and impulsive, but it never plays into the stories. You never have a story where something like that happens and he has to learn from it. It just seems like he's brash for the sakes of being brash. Like I said, Matthew Waterhouse was just a kid at the time, and his performance isn't the best, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. You can see he's trying, especially when he sees the TARDIS for the first time, and you see that he's the Matthew's trying to put like a struggling emotion onto Adric. And he does have a little bit of a character in here as he's trying to join his brother's group, and it's basically him trying to become a boy, being a boy becoming a man, which doesn't really play out. Andrew Smith had inspirations from like Oliver, all of a twist, and the original plan is that the Doctor would have been the Archer Dodger who would teach these young kids to learn how to steal basically with a moral code, but that never actually plays out in the story due to rewrites and suggestions from John Nathan Turner. And yeah, so Adric isn't really, like, I wouldn't have put him as a companion in after watching this story, but you can't argue with history. He did become a companion, and because of it we have probably one of the best companion endings, so that's something to thank for Full Circle. We had Earthshock because of it. The Doctor encounters wanders around as he orders K9 to go and follow the Marchman, to which the K9 completely fails, showing why he's just a stupid tin dog, as the Marshmen go over like a pit on the floor. They walk past it, and K9, because he's like a robot dog on wheels, can't get past it. And the story even like addresses at it. The cameras plays as a joke, and you got the music commenting on it, and it just feels a little bit silly. And yeah, K9 doesn't get a lot to do in this. He's abruptly murdered in part 2, which I find hilarious, because this is the second time they've killed him off before he can actually do anything. So it just goes to show how behind the scenes John Nathan Turner and the script editor, what's his name? I can't remember. Christopher H. Brutusman or something like that. They both agreed that they just bloody hated K9 and he should leave as soon as possible. But yeah, K9 is killed off, but he gets better because he's a robot. They can fix him. And the Doctor finds the Stargazer, and he uses his sonic screwdriver to get in, and whilst he's there, he also accidentally gets a Marshman in because he's let the door open. And when he's there, he actually kind of befriends the poor little creature. There's a great moment where the civilians are like rounding it up, and the Doctor comes out and it's like, put your weapons away, you're scaring him. And it's like, it's okay, everything will be fine. And then the Doctor gets whacked at the back of the head, and they take the Marshman to be experimented on. The Doctor later then wakes up and gets trialed, and he's basically disgusted by this. Now, Tom Baker, as I've been saying in previous season 18 stories, he's a bit more calmed down. He's not as wacky, shall we say, as in previous seasons. And this story just goes to show how much better that is for the narrative. Because when he finds out about these people that been basically, they just hate these Marchmen, and they capture the poor creature and want to experiment on it, and just thing. The Doctor gets really, really pissed, and it's one of my favourite Tom Baker moments. He just has no barriers. If he hates these characters, he's going to let them know. He also reveals that this ship is in perfect order. They could take off any moment, so why don't they? However, the leader reveals a twist in the plot. This ship was actually organised by their ancestors and gave him the knowledge on how to fix it, but didn't tell him how to pilot it. Excuse me one moment. That's pretty stupid. But anyway, and I really don't like that part of the story, because the end of the story just has the Doctor just teaching him how to do it and then wandering off anyway. So I don't know what was the point of that. They could have just said it was delayed. Now let's talk about the leaders. You've got they're called the Deciders. The three leaders, Deciders, and they basically decide for everyone. and they introduced a new member. Like there were two of them, now they introduced a third one called Logan, who's a very highly noble person in their society. So they hired him to basically take the fault because he was so beloved. So everything goes wrong, it goes to him. And there's kind of like a subtle running joke that despite them being called deciders, they can't decide on anything, which is really funny because everything they do, they bicker about it, and they can't decide on what to do, so they just basically postpone everything, which actually does play a lot into the story. And I think this is what makes the story work really well, is that Andrew Smith gives us a script talking about how sometimes like politicians need to just act sometimes, and just doing nothing is worse than doing something's better than nothing, innit? So and the script really complements that angle of the story, and it makes this story very, very good in terms of just pure writing. And it's still just a complete shock to find out that Andrew Smith was a teenager when he wrote this. He was 18. He had just come out of university, and my God, how do you make a script this good? And but I digress. But anyway, so the Doctor teams up with Adric's Romana teams up with Adric's team, because Adric's brother's team, because they kidnap the TARDIS, they capture the TARDIS, and the Marshmen take the TARDIS to the cave, and this is where K9 gets booted in the back of the head. Probably one of my favourite scenes. I like K9, but something about the hit of that is just satisfying as hell. And so Romana and all that go out to explore after the Marshmen disappear, and there's these bunch of spiders, and one of them bites Romana, and she seems to have lost all memory. And Adric, trying to open the doors again, accidentally sends the TARDIS on a short trip into the Stargazer, where they interact with the Doctor, and the Doctor then takes the TARDIS back to save Romana, but she seems to be possessed by the Marshmen as she becomes sort of violent, and she has a kind of like a painted thing on her face, and she starts clawing at the Doctor. And I really like this just weird element of the story about the Marshmen and just these spider creatures and all that. There's something about all this strange stuff that I really just like in my 80s Doctor Who. I think John Nathan Turner does a fantastic job at producing stories which have a little bit of mystery in their plots. So anyway, let's talk about the directing. Peter Grimwood is a great director. The shots look beautiful. Some of the location shooting is just really good, and some of the set pieces and how they're shot are very good. And the way he shoots Tom Baker, Tom Baker really has a presence in this story. But going off the last two stories, The Leisurous Hive and Meglos, I will admit it does feel like a huge downgrade. It's not bad by any chance, don't get me wrong. I mean, it has to happen eventually. But the last two were just so good in terms of how the story looks. Coming to this, it kind of like lowers a bit in quality, but nothing too bad. It does seem like he didn't have the same equipment as previous directors. There's a lot less moving of the camera. There's a lot more still shots, and nothing really noteworthy in terms of any particular camera shots. So it's okay. It works. It's And it's still, don't get me wrong, it's still a greatly directed story. It's just previous adventures did it better. But anyway, so back to the plot. So the rest of part 4 I think is really weak. I think the story ends on a weak note because the majority of the Doctor's point of view is just trying to figure out what the Marshmen are and why these people are afraid of them and stuff. But the Marshmen seem to just come in, start attacking things, and then just leave. And the story acts as if it's ended, as if mission accomplished. But nothing seems to be resolved in terms of the Marshmen's point of view. They seem to have been creatures that slowly develop into more intelligent beings as they start using doors and they use weapons. They look at people using weapons and they pick up the same weapons and they use them the same way. In fact, there's a great moment in which the Doctor tricks them because he knows that they are highly dependent on oxygen. So he uses this thing to basically take away a little bit of the oxygen away in the local area, and they use it because they see the Doctor using it and it stuns them. So that's a really cool, smart moment of the Doctor. But in terms of their plot, they just seem to have just come to the ship, attack the people, and just walk away. So the plot element in terms of how the story ends really resolves around the Doctor and what he figures out. And what he figures out is that the people on the ship, the Marshmen and the spiders, have the exact same DNA, implying that they're all from the same family group. The Marshmen are these humanoid characters' ancestors. In like the early parts in the story, it's implied that they are aliens that have come down here for food and stuff, and they're going to travel back up into their home planet. But here, it's actually explained that they've always come from this. This is their home planet. Alzarius is their home planet. Which is just really, it's a very strange aspect. I mean, I like the twist that, like, they weren't like, that these aliens are not really bad. They're just the ancestors. And I really like the Doctor in this story in terms of how he reacts with the Marshmen and these people. He tries to bridge them together. It's not like the Marshmen are evil or the human are evil. You can see them both as just species, and each individual have their own motives. So that really works well to the story, and it makes me feel like this story would have also really worked well with the Third Doctor era, because a lot of Third Doctor stories are like that. But the strange thing about it is that when the Doctor basically announces this, the story acts like that's the conclusion, that's the climax of the adventure. As if like that's the final moment. Just realizing this, it ends the story. And I think that's really weak. And it does take a few points out for me personally. So the Doctor and Romana are waving everyone goodbye, and Adric, you see him in the TARDIS giving the Doctor a device, because he was looking for a device to help him navigate through e-space. He was going to return it. But he's in the TARDIS and he thinks to himself, and so he hides behind a door. And so the Doctor and Romana go in the TARDIS and leave. And that's our end of the story. So there you go, that's full circle. Overall, it is a very well written story. It has some great things to say about how just politicians, just when they don't do anything and they just try and shift the blame, and how it also deals a little bit with racism, because the Marshmen appear to be more aggressive than they actually are, and they actually are part of the same species as them. And they all should be under one roof, but they're not treated as such. And the atmosphere, the music, Tom Baker probably giving out one of his best, most serious interpretations of the Doctor. Like I said, that trial scene where he has a go at them is just really, really well acted. but it's not particularly the strongest. The ending is really weak. Some of the plot elements just don't seem to add up. Adric is kind of a hindrance, depending on how much you like him. Romana, I just realised, doesn't get a lot to do in this story. This would be during a time very publicly that Lala Ward and Tom Baker were having a divorce. So their relationship behind the scenes were really rocky, and you can see that in the story that the Doctor and Romana don't seem to be as close as they were in previous stories, which is a very sad thing that that life problems are getting involved in the story. But it's still a great story, and I highly recommend you you watch it. And the only thing I can say about that the story is good, the best of the E-Space is yet to come. So join me next time when the Doctor and Romana discover that Adric is stowed away, and so he has forcefully become a companion. And the Doctor and Romana encounter one of the Gallifreyans' greatest enemies. So join me next time for The State of Decay. See you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.